Somehow you're going to start holding it. Everything looks open. Hi again, Court.
Good morning, everybody. It's good. Thank you, Pastor Bob, for this opportunity.
Amen.
Yeah, we were talking about in the advanced study a couple weeks about Jesus. He was in Gethsemane in the garden. What a hard thing he had to do, knowing what was ahead, what was coming. And he still went through it for us, for each and every one of us, because he wanted to save each and every one of us. So it was important for him to do that. It was the only thing he could do was to die on the cross for us. And we serve a loving God, and he loves each and every one of us. He wants to remove every obstacle, every burden in our life that will keep us from him. So I got a few of my favorite verses here I wanted to share before I got into the testimony. One is Romans 11:32, and none of them are going to be on the board, so. But Romans 11:32, for God has bound everyone over to disobedience, so that he may have mercy on them all. So there's not one of us that's more disobedient or evil or bad than another. We've all been bound over disobedience, so we're all on a level playing field no matter where we are in life. To me, that's a great comfort, because for a while there I thought I was worse than most people, and then when I seen that, it meant a lot to me and helped me out. And this stuff that I'm sharing with you this morning, I didn't know this 20 years ago, and it really would have helped me get through life. So for the younger people out there, especially for you that don't know this stuff, I think this would be really important to get you through life. Even some of you that may be moving away and say, oh man, might go through some hard times, some suffering and trouble. And then Romans 5, verses 3 through 5. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts. And isn't that our goal, for God's love to be poured out in our heart? Amen. Who wouldn't want that? And in Ezekiel, don't fear if you have an evil heart, because in Ezekiel 36:26, it says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. So is anyone without excuse? No, because God not only knows our hearts, but he can change our hearts. Back in Romans chapter 5, verse 6. You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. So, we think about salvation, about when we come to the Lord. Some of you come to the Lord, I know this. But when we come to the Lord, we do it in his strength. He calls us, and he puts salvation in front of us and gives us the desire to accept salvation, to accept what he did on the cross, to accept the price that's been paid. And then once this has happened, God keeps us saved. He doesn't leave it up to us and just leave us on our own and say, okay, you're saved, now keep yourself saved, and you better not mess up. God doesn't say that. He keeps us saved. You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. So even though we're powerless, we're ungodly, he died for us. And verse 8, but God demonstrates his own love for us, and while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So even though we get saved, we still get pulled away by the evils of the world, by our past sinful life, Satan's attacks, God's testing. And we need to kind of sort these things out, but the main thing to remember is that God takes us through this process. He demonstrates his love for us, and while we're still sinners, he's still demonstrating his love. We're still going to mess up today. I still mess up. I'm sure we all do. But while we're still in our sins, messing up, God's still there to show us his love, his goodness, and his kindness, and that brings us to repentance. But he does the work through us. We don't have to do this on our own. God does the work for us. And then in verse 10, for if while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son. How much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life? So enemies. We were enemies to the cross. Our flesh is enmity with the Spirit, enmity against God. And while we're enemies, he said, surrender, and he saves us. And that's what we're asked to do ultimately in salvation, is to surrender to the Lord, put our trust in him. Now, when I was about 15 years old, I said a sinner's prayer. I went up front to a church, and there was this man there named Carl. I can't remember his last name, so we're going to call him Carl. Carl sealed the deal. Vargas. And I went up there not really knowing what I was doing, and he said, repeat after me. Do you believe that, Jesus is Lord, and he died for you? And I repeated after him. And you're a sinner, yes. And I said, will you live your life for him? Sure. He said, okay, great, you're going to heaven. You're saved. And I felt pretty good about that. But I don't believe I completely read the contract. I didn't know really what was going on at that point in my life. I liked the part about him, saving me and taking me to heaven, and that he's going to be my Lord, but I didn't even know what it meant to have a Lord. To have a Lord, there's obedience involved, and there are a lot of things, and I was on really good terms with myself at that point. I remember thinking after that, a couple weeks later, I think I might have mentioned it to Mark, he was taking me to church at the time. I said, I don't really see where, I did that much bad stuff in my life that God really had to die for all that. And, I heard about this thief on the cross. He waited to the end, and he got saved. I could have lived my life and did my thing. It was really wrong thinking on my part. But I didn't know. I wasn't raised in church. And I just, and God loved me. God loved me too much to allow me to continue in that thought of, being on really good terms with myself. So, after that point, things got worse. I looked like I ran right the opposite way from God. I went the other direction. My Christianity was a mockery to Christianity. I went the other way. It wasn't a plan. I wasn't trying to be evil or spiteful, but that's who I was. I was, depraved, evil, nothing good in me. And I didn't realize that. But God's too good. God's too loving to allow me to go through that, or to allow anybody to go through that. So, about 4 years later, I was 19, and I had made a pretty good way of doing things the way I want to do in life for the last 4 years. Basically being God in my own life, making my own decisions. And I never really gave it any thought, but, was Jesus Lord in my life, or was I Lord in my life? I was making the decisions. I was saying what I want. My conscience was justifying the things that I did and didn't do. I can make an excuse for just about anything. But God had different plans. God loves us. He loved me. And even though I was an enemy to him, my life was contrary. Even after, saying that prayer with Carl, God had something in mind. He always does. He removes all the burdens and all the obstacles for us so he can make a clear, straight path to him, to salvation. So I guess I'll get on to the story. I really don't like this part, but so I was 19 years old. Austin back there, the big boy next to my mom. He was about ready to be born. It was January 20th, 1996. Austin was going to be born any day. We had the car seat in the car. I'm a brand new dad, not a dad yet. I waited for my first child to be born. And I just changed jobs. I'm working at Upstate University Hospital as a security guard. And I'm going to try now. I'm going to make a go of it. I actually had a Bible in my pocket. I was going to start reading the Bible, and I wanted to get right. I knew I wasn't. It was in the back of my mind all along that I wasn't living right the way I should. And I knew things had to change, but I didn't realize how it was going to happen. And that's the thing. We never know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's all in God's hands. There's something called providence, and that basically means that God can see tomorrow. We can't see tomorrow. We're limited to today, but we have to trust in a God that we know He knows tomorrow. And So if you're going through something or you've gone through something, God knows why you had to go through that. And it's for your good. It's always for the ultimate good. God's plan is always for the good for us because He loves us. So that night, I think it was a Monday night, January 20th, I was working the night shift, and I had to get to Syracuse, short 45-minute drive. And I've been going back and forth to work for a couple weeks now, but Cicero Swamp, Route 298, some of you are familiar with it, it floods in the wintertime. And I had been driving through there on a couple inches of water, and it wasn't a big deal. It was this giant obstacle, this giant sign that said, local traffic only, you shouldn't go through here, roads closed, or don't go through here, roads closed. And I've been driving around that. I learned sometimes God, He'll use an obstacle in our life to remove the obstacles out of our life. And that particular night, I thought I was just going to drive through there like I usually do. And I had passed the sign, and I got up to the flooding, and I thought I was just going to drive through it. And I didn't know this, obviously, but what had happened is it had warmed up and then cooled down and warmed up again and then cooled down again. So the bottom of the swamp had froze, and the water had come up about 4 feet in the deepest part in the middle. And then it had froze over the top. So I wasn't driving on a couple inches of ice or a couple inches of water. I was driving on 4 feet of water with ice over the top there. And I had drove out. The car stayed on the ice for a while, and then it broke through the ice. And now I'm thinking, this is not working out. This is not what I had planned. And I'm still thinking, I gotta get to work. This is a brand new job. I'm gonna get fired. I've got a baby coming, and I need this job. I didn't have two nickels to rub together, and I wasn't thinking clearly. So the water starts coming in the car, and now I'm panicking. And I don't panic. This is something new to me. I don't know how to handle panic well. The water is starting to come in, and I looked around, and I'm picking up the stuff like on the seats, and I'm pushing it up higher in the back of the car so the water doesn't get by. I grabbed the car seat, I put it in the back so it wouldn't get ruined, and this is not good. And now the water's coming in, it's like, I've got to get out of this car. So I went to get up and get out of the car, and I was going to step on the side of the window and get up on the roof, and instead of making it to the top of the roof, I slipped and I fell through the ice down into the water. And it's about 5 degrees, it was like 5 degrees out that night, or 8 degrees, something like that. And I went through, now I'm out in the middle of the swamp in the dark, and I went under the water, and I come back up, and now it's like really cold. I was just in a warm car a minute ago, everything was great, and now I'm standing in water, freezing. Not quite freezing yet, but very cold at this point. And I get up on the roof of the car, and I had a blanket in there. I had a lunch that my grandmother had packed me. I had a thermos, and the blanket didn't make it. It stayed in the water. Thermos and lunchbox are floating. They're off on the ice where the ice had broke, floating away. And I make it up on top of the car. And I'm like, this is not. I don't know what to do. I'm just up there and thinking, car's in. I'm in a world of trouble. And I stood there. I sat there for maybe half an hour or something. And then it started getting really, really cold. I started like shivering really violently. Shivering so bad that it was painful. It hurt a lot. But I was still thinking, and it's like, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to be able to survive this night if I stay on top of this car. And then I started thinking about, like, there's a good chance this might not work out. You might die. I remember reading To Build a Fire by Jack London in high school. We had to sign reading about the guy who built a fire, and he died. And he wasn't laying in the water, Here I am, soaked to the bone on top of this car. And I thought about, okay, well, might not make it. I gotta get on. I gotta do something. So I seen on the other side of 298, there's a tavern or something. There was this light out in front, like an outside light, and I could see that light. I thought, well, if I can get to that light, they'll have a telephone, and I'll be able to call somebody, and I'll go in there, I'll warm up. Help will come, and Maybe I can still make it work on time, or, late. And so I climbed down into the icy water, and I couldn't just walk through it because there was ice on top of it. So I had to take my elbows and break the ice. And I'm trying to walk through this ice and break it. And I walked as far as I could until my arms were so tired that they couldn't break the ice no more, so I couldn't proceed. And I just pulled myself up on a piece of ice and I laid there on my side. So I got my strength back. And then I gotta keep going. So I went back in the icy water and I did it again with the elbows, breaking the ice, walking. And then I ran out of strength even sooner that next time. I got up on the ice. And I laid there for a little bit and I'm like, this is not working out. I might actually die out here. And then I thought about well, I'm never gonna get to see my new baby that's born. I've been waiting for a while for that. Never gonna get to see that happen. I never got to say goodbye to my mom and my dad. And that was really upsetting to me, thinking this could be the end. I gotta keep going. And I pushed myself back in the icy water again. With the elbows, breaking the ice, walking out further. And I think it actually progressively got a little bit deeper, but the ice was elbow height. It was up here. My arms were sore and I was tired. And I ran out of strength even sooner. I pulled myself up on the ice and I laid there to get my strength back and to go. And I still had more than half the way to go. I hadn't hardly even made a dent in this walk. It was and I was in really good shape, I think, for the time. And I went to get off the ice that last time, and my legs stopped moving. I couldn't feel my legs; they wouldn't move, and I was stuck. I was stuck laying on that ice, and I'm shivering violently. And the longer I lay there, the more it hurt. And then all my muscles contracted. When you get really cold, your body kind of contracts up like an involuntary response, and it hurts so bad when your muscles contract like that. But it was wicked painful, and sometimes I learned this afterwards. Hypothermia victims, when they bring them in, they're all crunched up in this fetal position almost, and they can't get them straightened back out. They have a hard time getting them straightened back out. They're locked into position. And that is what had happened to me. I was locked up, shivering, and pain, couldn't move, and now I'm thinking I'm in trouble. I'm gonna die out here. And then the pain started, the real pain started, the frostbite, the burning, the numbness, the shivering subsided somewhat, and the numbness went to burning, and my body felt like it was on fire, like everything was burning. And it burned really bad. I mean, fire. I don't know how to describe it, but it just felt like fire. And the longer I lay there, the worse the burning got. And then I got number, and then the burning moved in. The outside got numb, and the fire just kept moving in closer and closer until it felt like my whole body was just consumed with flames. But that's not the worst part of it. The worst part for me was the regret. And at this point, I couldn't think anymore about normal things. I stopped thinking about my dad and my mom. I stopped thinking that I wasn't going to get to see my child anymore. There was no thoughts in my head other than this regret. Why did you come down here? You just hadn't done this. And it was the only thought in my head was regret. And it was this worm in my head. It felt like it was literally going around in a circle. Why did you do this? Why did you do this? And it was just regret. It's the only thought I had. But through all this, I know God was with me. At the time, it didn't seem like it. And a lot of people have these nice experiences where God talks to them and stuff. For me, that night, God talked to me in His silence. I didn't feel God's presence. I felt like I was completely alone, and God was nowhere to be found. And God hadn't sent me down that road. I chose to go down that road. And being on all too good terms, with myself, at this point, I realize I'm a sinner. I'm in trouble. I'm not doing good. And there's a definite deficit here. And sometimes in life, God gives us these dark hours, His providence. He shows us that, you're sinful. you're not right. You're not right with me. He does this not to punish us, but because he loves us so much, he can't allow us to stay where we're at. And when we see that deficit, when we see that death, that sin death, we realize how much of a price God paid for us on that cross. He took all that sin on for the whole entire world. And just the part I was feeling that night, I felt horrible, but at the same time, after a fashion, I say after a fashion because at this point I'm still feeling regret. Because I thought I had control of the situation because I was God in my life. So I had regret because I was the one who controlled what was going on. And that's not life. I had a skewed idea of things which didn't work out for me. But, so, to me this is amazing. Here I am, I can't think of anything. I can't think of my loved ones I'm leaving. I tried at one point to sing a song, just for comfort. I'll sing a song. I couldn't get a song. There's not one song would come to my head. I don't know if I was brain dead at that point or what, but I couldn't get one song in my head. I couldn't think of my loved ones, just this regret. And then, it's like, I can pray. God gave me an opportunity to pray. And I could pray to God. And it was an open communication. And he was there with me, and I was praying to him. And at that point in my life, I knew I was a sinner, I knew my debt, I knew he paid it all, and I trusted him. I trusted God, and I trusted God with my life. Not for me to be God in my life, but for him to be God in my life. And at that point, something Carl probably told me during that prayer, but I missed it, there's a part of salvation that's complete surrender. And that's what I did. I surrendered. God gave me the opportunity to surrender and trust him. And after that, I was at the safest place ever in my life. Laying out there after I made that decision and I had completely trusted the Lord and surrendered to him. I was the safest place I could be. But I was still, my body still felt like it was on fire. I was still in a lot of pain. And I laid there. It's like, okay, God, everything's good now. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm ready to go. I knew I was going to die, but I didn't die. And I was ready to go, though. And it hurt so bad. The fire, the pain hurt so bad, so I raised my hands. This went on for hours. It's like, okay, God, I'm ready. I raised both my hands up and just asked him. I said, I'm ready to go. But it didn't happen. And I thought, well, the thief on the cross, Jesus said today will be with you in paradise. And I didn't get that. For some reason, he didn't tell me I was going to be with him today in paradise. I didn't understand why now. But, so I laid there for hours and hours and hours. I fell through the ice. The car broke through the ice at about 10:15 that night. And I was there all night long until the next morning, about 8 o'clock or so. I'll be back up a little bit. I found out later, 2 o'clock in the morning, I had been crying for help, howling, until I didn't have that anymore. But about 2 o'clock in the morning, I cried for help, and this guy down the street had heard me. Wouldn't it have been nice to have a cell phone, right? I didn't have a cell phone. This was before the days of cell phone, but there was people with video cameras back then. Everybody had their great big VHS video cameras. So this guy down the road, he heard me hollering. He called 911, or whatever they had in place at that time. And these state troopers or sheriffs or somebody came out. And I had seen the lights. I had seen the car pull to the side, but they did not see me because I'm laying on a piece of ice. There's broken ice everywhere. It's dark, and I look just like a piece of ice that's laying there. I can't move at this point. I'm just all contracted up. And so I see him come, I see him go, and it's like, that's not good. So I laid there. There's nothing else I could do. And 8 o'clock that next morning, I had been conscious all night. Sometimes I had my eyes closed, other times I had them open. But I looked over, and I opened my eyes, and it's like, it's daylight. I looked over, and there's a car next to the side of the flooded out area on the other side. And this guy walked up to the edge, and he hollered to me, "Do you need help?" And I tried to say, yes, I do need help. Please go get someone to help me. And it came out, because I couldn't talk because of the hypothermia and the frostbite. And so he left. And I thought, maybe God's got something different for me. I'm not thinking about it. It was the first hopeful moment there in a while. So they come back and ambulances and fire trucks and police officers and all this stuff. They tried getting out to me and they couldn't get to me. They turned around and went back. And thinking, how are they going to get to me? Because they couldn't go, they had the same dilemma that I had. You couldn't walk on the ice, you couldn't walk through the ice. So they don't really make something in between, at least I didn't know of it. So I'm laying there and I cannot move. And I learned later about hypothermia. Your respiration pretty much shuts down. You're not breathing. You know, if you are, it's very, very little. Your pulse slows down, and your body gets extremely cold. There's no real core temperature, right? So I'm in no shape to do anything, and my muscles are all contracted, and I'm laying on the ice. Ty, you want to show that?
In the video?
Little video now? This will explain more. The man that heard me in the middle of the night came down in the morning to prove himself he wasn't crazy. He brought his video camera with him, and he happened to catch it on video. So, this is what happened.
It, I pressed play.
It's stalling. One second, I had it working a second ago. Yeah, one second. Come on, come on, come on. It'll work. Now, here we go. Yeah, okay, hold on. Just make sure it gets first. Come on. It was playing this second, right?
This is kind of what it was like for me, the waiting. You know? That's exactly it. I was just laying there and waiting. Couldn't do anything either. Nice touch work. Thanks for that.
Worst part is it was just playing a second ago when I popped the disc in, so let me just try popping the disc again.
I could put a little plug in for the Harvard family right now. They're such a loving family. I've never met such a family as a whole that gives as much as they do. Really appreciate them.
Alright, try it again. Here we go. Booty, it's launching.
You got one on the job.
It will work now.
Here we go, here we go.
Uh-oh. Okay.
It started in the beginning. So they run a helicopter. You can't see me because I'm still laying down up there. That's me starting to stand up there. It was a miracle, truly from God. I don't know how it happened. I couldn't feel my legs. I'm standing up now. And I was as surprised as you were when it happened. It's like, I'm standing up. I couldn't feel my legs at all. I felt like I was on 2x4s when I was standing up and all of a sudden getting ready to grab the low ramp.
How long has this guy been down there? I heard it.
The view was really impressive. It did fall. I did feel like I was going to slip and fall out of that ring though. I didn't have any strength, and I was hanging on for all I could for like 10 hours with no strength. It was another miracle to have, just be able to hang on. Yeah, I honestly thought I was going to fall, break into a million little ice cubes.
You have to explain your limbs when you're done with this.
You had a real life Superman moment.
It was still about 8 degrees out that morning.
It's not good. So yeah, this doesn't
A little bit cold just watching this. No, it was just me. See my arms hanging on to the. That's pretty much it.
Turn positive.
So they put me in the ambulance. The man in the ambulance, the driver, and was helping. His name was Gary. I didn't know this at the time. But he had asked me how long I'd been out there, and I told him, about 10 o'clock, 10:30 the night before, and I out there for 10 hours. And he was getting out like thermometers and heart checker things and all this stuff. And he apologized to me. He said, I don't know, for some reason our equipment isn't working. You can't get no pulse. You don't have any body temperature, and nothing seems to be working here. And I'm like, oh, that's okay. I was just really happy to be in the ambulance, It didn't dawn on me, but I can't forget this part. This is pivotal. When they brought me down and put me in the ambulance, I felt like God had given me a gigantic hug. Like He was just hugging me. And the first thing I said to her was, I love God. And it came out, clear words, I love God. And so Harry's trying to get these vitals, and he's like, you have no core temperature. I'm like, okay, I'm still thinking it's an equipment problem. He goes, what we're gonna have to do is put a tourniquet around both your arms and both your legs. He goes, you're gonna lose them. You're gonna lose your arms and your legs. But we're gonna try to get your core temperature up because you don't have one and it'll save your life. And I was fine with that. I had such a peace at that point. I was so happy, such a great joy. I was okay with it. That's fine. I've got a second chance. I've been saved. God's accepted me and loves me, and He's a gracious God, and I'm going to heaven. This is all the stuff that's going through my mind, and I'm fine with that. So He puts the tourniquets around my arms and my legs, and we start making it off to Syracuse University, which was where I was trying to get in the first place for my job at Spirit Guard. We get in there, and by the time we get there, He's taking the tourniquets off my arms, and He goes, you're going to be able to keep your arms. And when I'm going in on the gurney, I had seen one of the security guards there that I recognized, and I'm talking to him. And I told him, I said, I'm not going to lose my job, am I? I was upset about that. And still thinking about, I've got to be a provider for my new coming family. And they said, don't worry about it, everything will be all right. My mom reminded me of that. And they had taken her outside when she got there. They might have too, and told her that he came in, he didn't have any vitals, he didn't have a heartbeat, he didn't have any respiration, and he had no cord, and he's going to lose his legs. And I had asked the lady on the way in, I said, am I going to be able to keep my legs? And she said, honey, I've been here 25 years, nobody's come in your condition alive.
And they were black, right? Your limbs were black, you said.
Yeah, let alone get to keep your legs. So they put me on this table and were trying to warm me up and all this. And from here down, looking at my legs, they were black. They turned black. And I asked my mom, I said, how do they look, Mom? Whether my mom believed it or not at the time, God did. And my mom said, everything's going to be all right. You're going to be fine, Justin. And I believed her. And they put me in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. They got my temperature up. I ended up having a pulse again, and up body temperature and respiration that they could measure, and the oxygen chamber in and out of that. My legs eventually went from black to pink, and then I'd get out and I'd go back to black again, and then back in. And over the course of time, they became perfectly fine. Everything went to white, the way it was supposed to be, and God saved my soul. He saved my life. He allowed me to keep my limbs. 5 days later, Austin was born. Since then, I've had 5 more children. God had a reason for everything. He worked it all out. So that's the end of the story. It makes me shiver sometimes.